I never thought my life would become the kind of story people whispered about or secretly watched online. But sometimes truth can be stranger, heavier, and far more painful than anything fiction could dream up. My name is Emily Carter, and I grew up in what seemed like an ordinary American family in Ohio. My parents, Michael and Sarah, had been married for nearly 20 years. To the outside world, we looked like a close-knit family, the kind people envied. Two parents who stayed together, raised their only daughter with love, and built a modest but comfortable life. But appearances, as I learned, can be deceiving. My father had always been my hero. As a little girl, I clung to his every word, followed him around the house, and believed he could do no wrong. He was tall, charismatic, and had the kind of presence that drew people in. He ran a small construction company, and many people in our town respected him for his hard work and generosity. My mother, Sarah, was different. She was calm, composed, and deeply protective of me. She worked as a school librarian, and though she wasn't as loud or outgoing as my father, she carried a quiet strength that only became visible when life tested her. Our home was filled with warmth, or so I thought. Dinner around the table, Sunday church, occasional family trips to the lake. These were the snapshots I carried in my heart. But beneath those moments, cracks were forming, ones I was too young and naive to notice. I didn't realize it then, but my parents' marriage was already fragile. They argued quietly when they thought I was asleep, and my father began spending more time away from home under the excuse of work emergencies. My mother, though suspicious, rarely confronted him directly, perhaps trying to preserve the peace for my sake. It was during my late teenage years that the situation spiraled into something I never could have imagined. I had just turned 19 and was navigating that awkward space between girlhood and adulthood. College was on the horizon, but I was still living at home, working part-time at a cafe, and leaning on my parents for guidance. My father, noticing my transition into adulthood, treated me differently. He spoke to me not as a child, but as someone closer to his equal, which at first felt flattering. He gave me advice about relationships, careers, and life in general. I felt seen, understood, and validated. But as time went on, those conversations grew more personal, and his attention shifted into areas that blurred the lines of what should have remained appropriate between a father and daughter. One night changed everything. I was in the living room with him while my mother was away visiting her sister. We were talking about my future, about how I sometimes felt misunderstood by my friends, and how much I valued our closeness. There was laughter, but also an intensity one couldn't quite explain. What started as comfort turned into something dangerously confusing. My father crossed a boundary, one I never expected him to cross, and in my confusion and lack of experience, I didn't resist. What happened that night is something I will carry with me forever. A moment of weakness, betrayal, and blurred lines that never should have existed. For weeks afterward, I lived in a fog of guilt and confusion. My father acted as though nothing unusual had happened, but he continued to treat me with a closeness that felt both protective and suffocating. Deep inside, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how to process it. I felt trapped between love, loyalty, shame, and fear. Part of me wanted to tell my mother, but how could I? She had always trusted my father, and I couldn't bear the thought of destroying her world, or mine. But secrets have a way of surfacing, no matter how much we try to bury them. One evening, my mother came home earlier than expected. She walked into the living room and found us together in a moment that exposed the truth. There was no hiding it anymore. The look on her face is something I will never forget. It was a mixture of shock, betrayal, and heartbreak that cut through the air like a knife. She didn't scream right away, but the silence that followed was even louder than any words could have been. My father tried to explain, stumbling over excuses that only made things worse. He said it wasn't what it looked like, but of course, it was exactly what it looked like. I stood frozen, unable to speak, tears streaming down my face as my mother's eyes shifted from him to me. In that moment, I felt like I had lost both parents, the father I once adored and the mother who had always been my anchor. That night turned into chaos. My mother confronted him, demanding answers, and for the first time, I saw my strong father crumble under her fury. He begged her to understand, insisted it was a mistake, but my mother wasn't having it. She turned her anger toward me as well, her words sharp and filled with pain. She asked how I could betray her, how I could let something like this happen. I tried to explain that I was confused, that I didn't know how to stop it, but my words sounded hollow even to my own ears. In the days that followed, the house became a battlefield. My mother refused to speak to either of us except in anger. She moved into the guest bedroom and threatened divorce. She told me that she didn't know who I was anymore, that the daughter she had raised with love and sacrifice seemed like a stranger. Her disappointment hurt worse than anything. I wanted her to understand that I hadn't gone looking for this, that I was just as lost and hurt as she was. But the betrayal had blinded her. Eventually, my father left the house, staying with a friend while my mother decided what to do. She was torn between the love she had once had for him and the unforgivable betrayal that had shattered her trust. As for me, she gave me an ultimatum. I could either leave the house and find my own way, or stay under her roof with strict boundaries, knowing things would never be the same. I chose to stay, mostly because I didn't know where else to go. But the atmosphere was suffocating. My mother treated me coldly, as though every word I spoke was another reminder of the wound I had inflicted on her. She monitored me constantly, rarely allowing me out of her sight, as though she feared I might somehow fall back into my father's orbit. At night, I heard her crying in her room, and each sob was a dagger to my heart. Months passed, and the weight of our fractured family grew heavier. My father tried to repair things, reaching out to me with apologies and promises, but I refused to engage. I realized too late that his role in my life had twisted into something it never should have been, and I wanted no part in keeping that connection alive. My mother, meanwhile, sought comfort in her work and friends, but she couldn't forgive me easily. She often reminded me of the pain I had caused, sometimes directly, sometimes through cold silence. What she did to me afterward wasn't physical, but it left scars all the same. She withdrew her affection, treating me more like a tenant than a daughter. The warmth I once felt in her embrace was gone, replaced by suspicion and bitterness. She told me she would never trust me again, and those words haunted me. In her eyes, I was a participant in her betrayal, not a victim of confusion and manipulation. Over time, I realized that forgiveness might never come, not from her and not from myself. I carried the shame everywhere I went, hiding it from friends, from coworkers, from anyone who might look too closely.